The reaction to this Supreme Court case has been illuminating, and I'm talking about, of course, affirmative action. The problem for the media is that a lot of the plaintiffs were Asian. A lot of people celebrating the decision are also Asian. And so, according to the left, this is kind of a betrayal. But it's not as though the Asians themselves are culpable, according to the media. They feel like the Asians are being used as a front for white supremacy. Let's discuss. An article which really exemplifies this bizarre viewpoint was published in NPR, and they quote an activist named Jeff Chang, who says, quote, "In the case of university admissions over the past decade, Asians serve as a sort of mask for white privilege, a mask that white privilege can wear in order to hide itself." So in this view, Asians are covertly advancing white supremacy, to the extent that they're collaborating with these lawsuits against affirmative action. I think this puts the left in a very confusing place because the left likes to think of themselves as a coalition of minorities against what? Against something. But if Asians are on the other side of that, then that sets up a kind of dangerous precedent, because imagine if you had a significant portion of Asians who are suddenly voting Republican or having conservative views. And it's a complex question, and it's an interesting question, but the idea that Asians are a front for white supremacy is pretty ridiculous, because for one thing, I think that Asians themselves know what's in their own interest, and they have agency, and they're smart, and if they don't believe that affirmative action is good for them, then we should probably take that at face value rather than assuming that they're being used for someone else's ends. And NPR basically wants to keep the focus on this antagonist, which is whiteness. And if you listen to NPR on the radio, that's almost the kind of subtext of almost every story that they talk about. It's really something. And their journalism, of course, is the same. And again, it really begs the question, why shouldn't Asians be allied with conservatives in the fight against affirmative action and perhaps in a larger political project? Well, in the case of Students for Fair Admissions v. Harvard and UNC, they were, as I said, they were plaintiffs in the case, because if you look at the Supreme Court opinion, there's overwhelming evidence that Asians were being discriminated against in college admissions, as were white people. So also from that NPR article, it talks about the case of John Wang. John Wang was in high school a student with, quote, stellar grades and test scores, but he was rejected from many of the top schools. Ultimately, he got into Georgia Tech, but nonetheless, it's like, why was he rejected from all the Ivies? He might have had dreams of going to a even more prestigious school. And Wang told his story to Fox News, quote, "And then Edwin Blum told me my results, and so they said I had a 20% chance of getting admission to Harvard as an Asian American, and then a 95% chance as an African American." So Edward Blum is a representative of SFFA, the Students for Fair Admissions, who was in the lawsuit against Harvard. So basically, if he were African American, he had a 95% chance of getting into Harvard. As an Asian, 20%. So that is pretty stark evidence of systemic discrimination. We hear so much about that. Yet merely saying this, according to NPR, is an example of, quote, anti-blackness. So they really want to make it taboo to raise these facts and raise these complaints. And this is what they're going to do to any Asian people who do. You say if an Asian person complains, you're part of white supremacy. You're a mask for white privilege. You don't even know what you're doing. You're actually a part of an evil force that you're participating in. But let's not get too excited, because the fact is that Asians are overwhelmingly Democrats. In the 2020 election, they voted 63% to 31% in favor of Biden. So that's pretty bad. That's a pretty bad number, as, you know, In fact, Hispanics are probably more likely to vote Republican than Asians. And the reason for that, according to an NBC exit poll, Asian Americans have been distinct from the general U.S. public when it comes to progressive views on healthcare, the environment, gun control, and a social safety net provided by the government. These issue positions have propelled Asian Americans toward the Democrat presidential candidate for the past 7 election cycles. So nothing wrong with, they're progressive on healthcare and the environment, gun control. Those are legitimate points of view, but it's just a lot of other stuff goes along with voting Democrat that is not quite so reasonable, and one of them is maybe affirmative action. Be that as it may, this whole reaction to affirmative action is amusing, and in the case of NPR, the liberal excess is quite apparent. My name is Michael McCara. Thank you so much for watching my video. Check out my social media in the description. Follow me on Twitter. Check out my very popular blog, and finally subscribe to my YouTube channel.
I've only heard what love can do, and now I'm getting love from you. Make your vows, make your vows.